Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Rose Halprin, Director of Library Futures, beaming into you from San Francisco, California, at the Internet Archive, though I usually live in Brooklyn, New York. Thank you all for joining us. I see that people are already introducing themselves in the chat, but feel free to do so. Where are you from? What excites you about the public domain? Before we really get started, I do want to thank and introduce Natalia Peruz, or the Saw Lady, a New York City creative, for that beautiful rendition of the 1929 hit. Happy Days Are Here Again, which you can also watch on her YouTube. It's such a poignant way to ring in today's festivities.
Hi, everyone, and I'm Leela Bailey, Senior Policy Counsel at the Internet Archive. Jenny and I are your hosts for this event today. Celebrating the public domain is a celebration of the richness and diversity of American culture. And throughout today's festivities, you'll get to hear interpretations of culture from our public domain and learn more about how to remix, reuse, and share in this tapestry of cultural heritage that makes up our American history. But before we get further into our celebration, we do want to make sure that we thank Chris Freeland, Caitlin Olson, and the rest of the amazing Internet Archive admin team for their incredible work on putting our Singin' in the Public Domain event together.
So when I hear Singin' in the Public Domain or the song Singin' in the Rain from 1929, I think do 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 do.
So Jenny, I think about Tom Holland's lip sync battle that broke the internet a couple of years ago, but as it turns out, Singin' in the Rain is actually a much older song than that, and Sean Dudley is going to tell us all about that.
Hi, my name is Sean. I'm a researcher at the Internet Archive. One of my favorite pieces of music is Singin' in the Rain. Of course, I know it best from the 1952 film, but it's actually from a 1929 film that just entered public domain called The Hollywood Review. The song's featured a couple of times, being sung by Cliff Edwards, who would later go on to be Jiminy Cricket, and then later on by this giant chorus of stars who are from the silent era and the early talkie era, all singing in raincoats in two-strip Technicolor, so some really early color in film. Now, when we think about Singin' in the Rain, we think about how many half-lives it's already had under copyright. The 1952 film, its reuse later on in A Clockwork Orange, and so many countless other moments. So now that it's in the public domain and it belongs to all of us, we can remix Singin' in the Rain however we want. And if you really like that idea, you should come and join us for our Singin' in the Public Domain event on January 22nd. Hope to see you there. See you there.
So as Sean pointed out, January 22nd is indeed today. So please join us if you're around in San Francisco tonight at the Internet Archive. So thank you so much to Sean for that video. It's so interesting, and believe it or not, it is the first of two times today that we will hear about 1920s pop star Cliff Edwards. One of the best ways to contextualize and work for a better future is to look to the past, to protect and preserve culture, to enable access to history. And who is better at educating us about the public domain, its past, and its future than our very own Jennifer Jenkins, the director of the Duke Center for the Study of the Public Domain. Take it away, Jennifer.
Hey everyone, how you doing? Can you see my PowerPoint presentation? We good? Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Leela. Thanks to the whole team at Internet Archive. Thanks, Sean, for another great Public Domain Day celebration. And so I am going to just highlight a few of the thousands of works that are that just went into the public domain this year and talk a bit about why it matters. So we've already talked about Singin' in the Rain and the movie in which it appeared. As a nerdy English major, I'm going to start off with some books. So as we all know, on January 1st, works from 1929 became open to everyone. That was the last year of the Roaring Twenties. It was the beginning of the Great Depression. It was the year that sound films took over. And here are some of the works that we'll be celebrating. If you'd like to read more about the legal minutiae, please visit our Public Domain Day website. So books. We've got Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, the wonderful feminist masterpiece from Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. We've got John Steinbeck's first book. We've got the first appearance. So the Maltese Falcon was actually initially serialized in a magazine called Black Mask. And so it fully appeared, the story, not word for word, but the full story in 1929. And finally, I think one of my favorites. So this is a spoof. This is a hilarious book from James Thurber and E.B. White. You might think, E.B. White, isn't that the Charlotte's Web guy? Yes, it is. Well, before that, they collaborated on this book, Is Sex Necessary, or Why You Feel the Way That You Do? It's a spoof on Freudian psychoanalysis, Men, Women, and Sex from 1929. So those are just some of the books that have entered the public domain that you can now freely find on the Internet Archive and other sources. But what about films? As I mentioned, this is the year that sound films really took over, and audiences had the amazing experience of being able to go to a theater and see cinema with synchronized sound. So we had the Marx Brothers' first feature film, The Coconuts, which is hilarious, and I highly recommend it. We had King Vidor's masterpiece, Hallelujah, which was one of the first major films featuring an all African-American cast, and you're going to see a scene from that in a moment. And sex symbol, It Girl, Claire Blanche. It was her first movie with sound, The Wild Parties from 1929. All of those films are in the public domain. What did synchronized film allow people to do? Well, dance. I love dancing. I hope there's going to be a lot of dancing at the party tonight. And some of the dance moves from 1929 are awesome. So here's just a selection from the cartoons and the movies that are now public domain. That's the one from Hallelujah that I love. This one's fantastic, Disney. I can't do this move, but I like it. And then, of course, penguins. So they're just a few of the many dance moves. We actually, Sean Dudley again, the wonderful public domain researcher, put together a longer video of dance moves from 1929. And then Mickey Mouse. What happened in 1929? Steamboat Willie famously went to the public domain last year, but we have a dozen new shorts, animated shorts featuring Mickey. He dons his white gloves and he speaks his first words.
Hot dog, hot dog. Hot dog, hot dog.
They are hot dogs, hot dogs. So Mickey's off to the races. He sings, he dances, he speaks, he wears white gloves, he flirts, sometimes successfully, sometimes without success with Minnie Mouse. All of those cartoons are now public domain. A familiar cameo. So many famous directors released their first sound films in 1929. One of them is Alfred Hitchcock. Another one's Cecil B. DeMille. Another one's John Ford. Hitchcock was doing at the very beginning, which is this one. And characters. So a lot of characters have always been in the public domain. Everyone from Greek mythology, Shakespeare's characters. Yes, Santa Claus is in the public domain, so is Snow White, but recent years have seen some famous characters entering the public domain, and there's been a lot of excitement about that. So Winnie the Pooh a few years ago, last year, Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Who do we get this year? We got Popeye the sailor, and you can see his very first appearance there at the bottom left. He's funny, he's sarcastic from the beginning. So the character that you see at the top, that's Castor Oil, who's Olive Oil's brother. And Castor Oil goes up to him and says, "Hey there, are you a sailor?" And as you can see, Popeye's on a deck and he's in a sailor outfit with a pipe and a hat and the anchor tattoo on his forearms. And he says, "Do you think I'm a cowboy?" So he is Popeye from the beginning, but one of the things that we discovered in our research was initially he gets his superhuman strength from, strangely, rubbing the head feathers of that wiffle hen there named Bernice. And so a lot of people were saying, wow, he didn't start eating spinach and getting power from that until 1931. And so that character feature must not yet be in the public domain. But to the best of our research capabilities, we discovered, thank you, Sean, that the copyright was never renewed, as it had to be back then after 28 years for the 1931 comic strip, meaning that the spinach-fueled superpower has now joined the original Popeye character in the public domain. But it's not just Popeye. It's Tintin, entered the public domain in the US, not elsewhere in the world, but in the US. And then Buck Rogers, who I adore, was also from 1929, but like the Spinach comic, so far as we can tell, the early Buck Rogers comic strips were not renewed. And so, yes, Buck Rogers is officially conclusively in the public domain this year, but he's actually been in the public domain for decades. We talked about Singin' in the Rain, other musical compositions of note that are newly public domain. Tiptoe Through the Tulips with Me. You may remember Tiny Tim's amazing falsetto rendition of that composition. Well, the underlying composition is now public domain. And so if you have a ukulele and a falsetto voice and want to make your own Tiny Tim version, you can do that. We also have Fats Waller's amazing song, Ain't Misbehavin', and Singing in the Rain, already discussed. And from the classical music area, we have Gershwin's An American in Paris and Ravel's Bolero, which is one of the most, I have been cleaning the kitchen to it. And may I say, try doing dishes to it. It really works. It just crescendos throughout and it was really great for cleaning house. It doesn't have to be tethered to eroticism. Okay, so that's compositions from 1929. They're public domain, but sound recordings, as many of you know, are on a different timetable, thanks to a law called the Music Modernization Act. So what sound recordings went into the public domain this year? Those from 1924, including George Gershwin. There he is again. It's his own performance of Rhapsody in Blue. And the amazing Marian Anderson, who later became a civil rights icon and an opera star. Some of her early recordings, including this one, My Way's Cloudy.
Oh, brethren, my way cloudy.
She has the most amazing voice. So moving on to why we care. Well, we know why we care. Everyone on this Zoom probably knows why we care. The first is access. All of these works can be made available to anyone online, for example, by the Internet Archive. But another reason is creativity. When works enter the public domain, anyone can use them as raw material for future works. And so this year, or last year, 2024, brought us two wonderful examples of how the public domain feeds creativity. And so what you see there is the cover of Percival Everett's novel, James. That's the novel that won the 2024 National Book Award. What is it? It's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of Jim, Huckleberry's friend, who was an escaped slave. The New York Times said it all. They said Huck Finn is a masterpiece. This retelling just might be too. Mark Twain, whose birth name was Samuel Clemens, famously wanted copyright to last forever. If he had had his wish, would his heirs have sued Everett? Thankfully, we don't have to find out. Because that book's in the public domain, Everett was free to publish James without such litigation. Another example, a lot of you guys may have gone out and seen Wicked. Like many other works, Wicked was built on L. Frank Baum's public domain, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book. And finally, one of the best examples of how the public domain feeds creativity is once again Disney themselves. And so if you go to YouTube and look for how Mickey got his tunes, you can find our mashup of great uses in those newly public domain cartoons from 1929, where Mickey actually uses public domain music at the time. Finally, a concluding note. We're celebrating today, but there's a lot of stress in the world. Sometimes problems seem insurmountable. Sometimes things seem intractable. And I have a story about that. The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. That's one of the books that just entered the public domain. And of course, the title of that novel was itself borrowed from another public domain work, Shakespeare's Macbeth, and the lament of Macbeth over the seeming meaninglessness of life. In Act 5, Macbeth says, life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. The Sound and the Fury was published on the eve of the Great Depression. And 20 years later, when Faulkner won the Nobel Prize for Literature, the world had witnessed horrors, economic crises that fueled the rise of authoritarianism, World War II, the Holocaust, nuclear weapons. Yet in his Nobel acceptance speech, Faulkner sounded a defiant note of optimism. Let's hear his own voice in his amazing accent.
I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul. a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. The poet's voice need not merely be the record of man. It can be one of the props, the pillars to help him endure and prevail.
So, in other words, Faulkner's saying that it's through art, through what Faulkner calls the old universal truths, love and pity and compassion and sacrifice, that life, far from signifying nothing, means something. And that's what these remarkable works entering the public domain have to teach us. Interestingly, one of the most powerful examples of this came not from some of the works of literature, but of all places, and Sean discovered this reading through the 1929 Popeye comics from Popeye. So this is incredible. Popeye spends a lot of his time flirting with olive oil, getting in fights, breaking out of jail. But this is 2 days, October 22nd, 1929, 2 days before Black Thursday, the beginning of the stock market crash that led to the Great Depression. And check out what Popeye's doing here. He's begging, he's imploring Castor Oil not to kick an old farmer off of his land. He says, you're not going to do it. You're not going to kick him off the old farm where he was brung up, the only home he's ever known. You're not going to do it, are you? This is Popeye. And what happens the next day, the day before Black Thursday? Popeye succeeds, and Castor Oil says, you know what, you got little kids. I can't kick you off of your land. And Popeye consoles the old farmer. And so even in the Popeye comic strip, on the eve of the Great Depression, from Popeye the Sailor, we see one of Faulkner's old universal truths. We see compassion. And that's the note that I'd like to end on. Thank you so much. So great to see everyone. Happy Public Domain celebration.
Oh my God, Jennifer, thank you so much. You are always so amazing at just crystallizing why the public domain is so relevant to us, even this many years later. We'd like to invite another amazing person to the stage next. We're excited to premiere a video from illustrator, comics artist, and web developer Vivian Lee. She is the Library of Congress's 2025 Innovator in Residence. Lee's video takes you on a delightful journey through her hometown of Seattle in order to share information about her project, Anywhere Adventures. Anywhere Adventures will spotlight histories from 3 U.S. cities that will be selected in early 2025 and chosen by people like you and me. The project encourages participants to use public domain collections from the Library of Congress in order to promote their own hometown through media. The finished website will provide self-guided tours and activities for each location, all culminating in a personalized zine that participants can share with others.
And after Vivian, we're going to hear some more music. As Jennifer illustrated, 1929 was really an extraordinary year for music. We've already heard 2 great hits, and we're going to continue on with a hit parade. Right after Vivian, we'll hear from Tim Finlan, multi-instrumentalist and band leader of Ruchi Tucci and the Ragtime Shepherd Kings, very much following in the legacy of Cliff Edwards and ukulele Ike. He's going to tell you about his personal connection to the song Louise, written for the film Innocence in Paris in 1929 and originally sung by Maurice Chevalier. Tim might not speak French very well, but he certainly can strum a ukulele. Feel free to sing along.
Hi, I'm Vivian Lee, and I'm the Innovator in Residence at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Oh, but this isn't the Library of Congress. It's actually the Seattle Public Library. I actually live in Seattle, Washington, not Washington, D.C., but I needed somewhere to film for my first location. I thought this would make sense, but you know what? Let's just get out of here. But it doesn't matter that I'm in Seattle and not in DC, because the Library of Congress has a massive online collection. And so within this huge collection, I can find really interesting stories about the place where I live. For example, the library has a collection featuring Susan B. Anthony's journals and other paper paraphernalia, and I wanted to know if she ever visited Seattle. And so I found this diary entry from 1871 on Halloween, which states, "Left Port Townsend at 3 p.m., worked on speech up to last minute. Arrived Seattle 7:20, went to Occidental Hotel, hard enough." So I was curious, where in Seattle is the Occidental Hotel? Was Susan like enjoying some Puget Sound views? Was she experiencing the nightlife in Cap Hill? Or was she like going out for an art walk in Belltown? I had to know. I did some digging and I found out that the Occidental Hotel was actually the first fancy hotel that Seattle ever had. It was built on the corner of 2nd, Yesler, and James on this triangle piece of land, and it had a lot of drama. The original Occidental Hotel was pretty simple, and I found a picture of it in this book titled Seattle Memories, but as the city grew, the hotel grew as well, and so they tore down the original to build the Occidental 2, which was built in the shape of a triangle to match to the triangle streets. However, this isn't a picture of the Occidental 2 because the Occidental 2 burned down only 4 years after its construction. This is a picture of Hotel Seattle, which was built to replace the original Triangle Hotel. But I am standing at the corner of James, 2nd, and Yesler right now, and as you might have noticed, this is no longer a hotel because this piece of land cannot catch a break. In 1949, a huge earthquake hit Olympia, Washington, and in that earthquake, a bunch of historic buildings in Seattle got damaged, including its titular hotel. That hotel got replaced with this parking garage called the Sinking Ship, which sounds like a bummer, but it was voted the coolest parking garage in the country. And it's cool because it takes advantage of the fact that it sits on an intersection of streets that make a triangle that lies along a hill in Seattle. So this whole trail of discovery and learning was sparked by just one little thing that I found in the library's collections, which makes me feel kind of like a history detective. And I love that because 1, unraveling a mystery is super exciting, but 2, the story that I found was about Seattle. And there are so many stories to be found in the library's collections. You just have to be a little bit of a spelunker. Anywhere Adventures is my project as innovator. It'll be a mobile website that uses Library of Congress's public domain items to share stories about the places that people live. Because it doesn't matter that I don't live in Washington, D.C. The stories that I'm learning are so meaningful to me because it's about a place that I care about. And it's surprising to me how much I'm learning about my own town through the lens of the library. For example, right now I'm standing in Discovery Park, which is this city park in the middle of the Seattle that has so many different landscapes, like forests, beaches, meadows, and even weird yellow buildings. I genuinely had no idea what these buildings were until I discovered some photos of them in the library's catalog. Now, these photos are in black and white, but I would recognize these weirdos in any color grading. It turns out that Discovery Park used to be the site of Seattle's only army post, and all of these buildings were built to support that. So they made barracks, officers' quarters, a gymnasium, stables, and something called band barracks, which I don't know what band barracks are, and nobody on the internet will tell me what they are, so that's just gonna have to be a mystery for another time. We're gonna launch Anywhere Adventures in 3 locations across the United States. We'll find cool items in the library's collections, do some investigating, and hopefully tell a story that's cool enough for you to want to go out and do some exploring for yourself. The first location is going to be Seattle because, well, it just makes sense. But we're very open to what the next 2 should be, and that's where you come in. Should Anywhere Adventures come to your hometown? Because no matter where you live, in the city or in the country, in the sprawling suburbs or on a ranch in Alaska or South Dakota, don't make me list all 50 states. There are interesting items about every single place sitting in that library's huge digital collections. So it's time for you to be a spelunker. Find an item about your town that's in the library's collections that's in the public domain. You can go to loc.gov and in the search bar, type in your town or any area that you're interested in learning more about. And you'll be slapped in the face with the amount of results that get returned. So you can use the filters on the left to narrow down your results. Maybe you want to filter by date, or you could look at the type of the item, so like audio, images, newspapers, or you could even find out what subjects are associated with your area. Once you find a cool item, then you can download it. After that, you can post it and tag me on Instagram at VivianLikesFruit and share some of your investigation. What about the item do you find cool, or what larger part of history did you discover because of it? Or you can go to labs.loc.gov and comment on the Signal blog post your item in your town. I find discovering things in the Library of Congress is so fun for me because no matter what item I find, if it's cool because it's really important, or if it shares some small slice of life of what it was like back then, or it's just completely, utterly charming, I have found a treasure. And I hope that in your exploration, you can find some items that surprise you as well. good luck and happy adventuring.
Oh my God, Vivian, that was.
Hi, this is Timmy Finland from Ruchi Tucci and the Ragtime Shepherd Kings. I dusted off a tune from 1929 that I learned from a Cliff Edwards recording that he did later in life, I think on a baritone ukulele. I realized I had heard it before, sung by Maurice Chevalier, and I never understood the words, so it didn't click that they were the same song. And it's called Louise. It's a special one for me. It's my grandmother's name, and after I learned it, she and I would play. She'd play the piano, and I'd sing along with her pretty badly, so hopefully I can do an okay version, but music is pretty hard, so we'll see. I think it goes something like this. Every little breeze seems to whisper Louise. Birds in the trees seem to twitter Louise. Each little rose tells me it knows I love you. Love you. Every little beat that I feel in my heart seems to repeat what I felt from the start. Each little sigh tells me that I adore you, Louise. Just to see and hear you brings joy I never knew. But to be so near you thrills me through and through. Anyone can see how I wanted your kiss. It had to be, but the wonder is this. Can it be true? Someone like you could love me, Louise. Just to see and hear you brings joy I never knew. But to be so near you thrills me through and through. Anyone can see how I wanted your kiss. It had to be, but the wonder is this. Can it be true? Someone like you could love me, Louise.
Oh my God, that was so charming. Thank you, Tim and Vivian, for inspiring us all to become detectives of history. 1929 is probably best known as the year of the October Wall Street crash, which ushered in the Great Depression. But 1929 was also a time of great change, a pivotal turning point in the progression of global fascism, wealth inequality, colonialism, and nationalism that would come to define the 20th century.
In spite of, or perhaps due to this global instability, experimental art movements were on the rise. Surrealism was a radical rethinking of the self. Social realism demonstrated the need for social change. And Art Deco created a new kind of urbanism that persists today. And of course, the Harlem Renaissance was one of the most important Black art movements in American history.
But culture includes so much more than just art. Jenny, did you know that 1929 was also the year that sunglasses were invented and mass-produced? Ice cream was the most popular dessert, and color television was first exhibited.
Wow. But in addition to inventing consumer items, Americans also invented some new words. While they seem commonplace now, words like big shot, blue collar, penicillin, which was a nascent medicine at that point, and hootenanny were also new. And 1929 saw some famous births, most notably Martin Luther King Jr., whom we celebrated earlier this week.
And while this event has mostly focused on 1929 so far, it is so exciting that sound recordings from 1924 are also in the public domain for the first time. And to explain what's going on with that, please welcome everybody's favorite music librarian, Kathleen DeLaurenti, director of Arthur Friedharm Music Library at Johns Hopkins University, who will give us a little background on why sound recordings are treated differently than musical compositions under copyright.
Thank you, Leila and Jenny, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm here to, it feels like maybe rain a little bit on our Public Domain Day parade. You heard Jennifer talk earlier about what was going into the public domain this year, and you might have noticed at the end, the sound recordings were dated from 1924. And you might have thought to yourself, why is that? As a few of you noted in the chat, copyright tends to be complicated around the public domain, and music always likes to add a little extra pizzazz to that complication. Before 2020, actually as recently as 2020, we didn't have any copyright for sound recordings that were made before 1972. Sound recordings were a format that Congress didn't think needed copyright protection until the 1976 copyright law was created, and then created a new kind of copyright for sound recordings specifically. This copyright is separate from the song and the music that you hear in those recordings. It's considered its own art form that has been fixed, presenting the original ideas of the performer's interpretation and the sound engineer's choices. So we have to think about these a little differently. When we got copyright for sound recordings in 2020, Congress could have decided to give them the same 95-year term that other materials had, which gives us our 1929 date today. But they thought that sound recordings could use a little extra protection because they'd never been protected before. So what we have now is a strange little chart of time that's going to change between now and 2067. So this year we're celebrating sound recordings that went into the public domain in 1924, and we will have 100 years of protection for recordings from 1925 until 1946. For recordings from 1947 to 1956, they get 110 years of recording. And then for recordings from 1957 until 1972, we won't see those go into the public domain until February 15th, 2067. So that can be potentially a very fun Valentine's Day for many of us if we want to plan that far ahead. Interestingly enough, the song that we're celebrating in the title of today's event won't have its flagship Gene Kelly recording go into the public domain until 110 years after the 1952 release of that sound recording alongside the film Singing in the Rain starring Gene Kelly. So just another fun wrinkle to keep in mind, but we're super excited that we have this change and that we now have certainty around public domain of sound recordings, which we didn't have in the past. So this has been a really important tool for libraries and archives to think about how we can take advantage of the exceptions for us to preserve and archive these materials to make sure that when they become public domain, you'll all have access to bringing them into your world of excitement and creativity. Now that we've complicated things a little bit more, I'm going to turn things over to our next speaker, Colin Hancock. Colin is a two-time Grammy-nominated jazz musician and historian from Austin, Texas, who's always been drawn to the sounds of early jazz, blues, ragtime, and old-time music. Colin's built his musical career around playing and recording in those styles of music, the technology around them, and preserving historical recordings for future generations to enjoy. He currently leads the Joymakers, a 10-piece hot jazz band focused on the sounds of 1920s territory bands of the South and Southwestern United States. We're going to hear Colin talk about a 1924 recording that's in the public domain of the song Copenhagen. and hear how it inspired 3 generations of his family and ignited his own interest in becoming a jazz musician.
For as long as I can remember, whenever anybody's asked me what my favorite year of recorded music is, I say 1924. And there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of important records were made that year. I mean, you have Louis Armstrong, who moved to New York that year and started recording with Clarence Williams and Fletcher Henderson. Bessie Smith, who really came into her own that year on record. You've got some of the earliest electrical recording done by Autograph and Compo, that was commercially released. And then you have really significant pieces like the Rhapsody in Blue. Yes, I know this is the later version. I don't have every record. And then you have some lesser known important ones like this one by the Princeton Triangle Jazz Band from Princeton University. But then you have things like the first jazz record made in my home state of Texas, and the first country record made in my home state of Texas, and things that were made very far from Texas, like this one made in Havana, Cuba. But of all those records, there's really one that stands out as the most important to me. And that's because it got me into all of this stuff and helped me appreciate this old music and made me love it. And, I think that's the quality of records that really draws so many people to this and the thing that makes them so special. So I'd like to talk today about Copenhagen by the Wolverine Orchestra, because that record is really what 1924 is all about for me. Now, I'm actually not the first person in my family who's been a fan of this record. That distinction belongs to my grandfather, John Hancock, who has a really interesting connection to it, and I think that's made my connection to it pretty strong too. You see, John heard this record for the first time back in the mid-1940s, so a little bit after it was recorded, when he was in the Royal Navy. He was originally a Brit, and during the Second World War, he met some American naval officers who, in conversation, brought up the fact that they were a fan of this musician, this kind of legendary figure of jazz who had passed away a few years earlier by the name of Leon Bismarck Bix Beiderbecke. And in that conversation, my grandfather learned of his recordings made with a group called the Wolverine Orchestra for the Jeanette label. And they played him this recording of Copenhagen by the Wolverines. My grandfather was hooked instantly. In fact, he liked it so much that he made it a priority when he returned back to the United Kingdom to buy a copy, which was only available there on an English Brunswick repressing. And so my dad, as a kid in the 50s and 60s, heard his copy of Copenhagen. That memory stayed with my dad, and in the 90s, when I was born, he had found a copy of Copenhagen on a CD featuring the Wolverines. And when he bought that CD, I guess one day he left it out on the table in our den in our house. And I remember seeing the cover of it and being intrigued by the photo of Bix. It was the one of him holding his cornet kind of on his knee, a famous portrait of Beiderbecke. And I grabbed the CD and I put it in my little CD player, and the minute I heard the sounds of that recording and that band, I knew that this was the kind of music I wanted to play and learn about and be a part of. And so I brought my dad the CD and I said, wow, this is really cool. And he said, oh, well, your grandfather is the one that introduced me to that. And that was just really something. And I asked him, when is this recording from? And he said that it was recorded in 1924. Fast forward to today, and I'm playing the music of 1924 on a weekly basis with my band, the Joymakers, here in Austin, or with various artists around the country. Internationally, I recently was given the honor of becoming a member of the committee to help select people to play at the Whitley Bay International Classic Jazz Party over near Newcastle in the United Kingdom, which focuses on music from the 20s, including the music of Bix in 1924. And I'm even playing the Bix Beiderbecke Festival this year and getting to play Beiderbecke's cornet, thanks to the wonderful Bix Beiderbecke Society. So it's just amazing that music from this year is now being made accessible to everyone in the public domain. And hopefully more people can have experiences like that, discovering this music or, in some cases, rediscovering it. And you remember all of those different genres and locations that the recordings were made in, and varieties of significance and historical importance that I mentioned at the beginning of the video for 1924 recordings. Well, that only scratches the surface. There is a wealth of stuff out there to discover and to learn about and to listen to. I mean, it doesn't just have to be jazz or blues or ragtime or country or Cuban or whatever. You can look into almost anything from that time period, and it will really give you so much. It's just waiting to be discovered, and now it can be. I'm sure that if my grandfather were around today to see that this record that he thought was cool in World War II meant so much to me now, he'd be amazed and so happy to know that I'm getting the same joy out of this music that was already an oldie when he heard it for the first time. I think it just goes to show that good music is good music, and y'all, when I tell you 1924 is full of it in so many different facets, give it a shot. You won't be disappointed, and it may change your life.
Wow. Colin is such a star, and thank you so much to Kathleen for that fantastic complication and presentation about the sounds of 1924.
Wow, that was my first time watching the video, and I was really moved by it. But now we are going to move from the West Coast to the East Coast for just a moment. On February 12th, we will be gathering at Caveat NYC at 6:30 p.m. in collaboration with Theater of the Apes, a downtown theater troupe, and WNYC's Public Song Contest. This show will resurrect An Hour with the Movies and the Talkies, a long-forgotten book, along with other 1929 hits. Here to talk about her project, Necromancers of the Public Domain, is Anne Halliday of Theater of the Apes, Lower East Side artist and creative. After that, we're going to have a really, really cool promo about the Public Song Project in a presentation from Simon Close of WNYC and the Brian Lero Show.
Hello, everybody. Happy Public Domain Day. So Necromancers of the Public Domain is an ongoing series wherein I choose a dusty, obscure, long-forgotten book from the shelves of the New York Society Library and gather a bunch of musicians and dancers and writers and clowns and burlesque people, whoever happens to be around. They all read the book, or at least give it a good hard skim, and then create an act that is inspired by a chapter, a picture, a sentence, maybe the book as the whole. Our goal is to raise this long forgotten book up out of the vortex where it has languished for so many years and celebrate it for all we're worth, and then slam it back down into the vortex. And maybe, just maybe, one of the people in the audience that night will be moved to go check this book out for themselves. So if you're in New York City on February 12th, we hope you'll join us at Caveat. If you're not in New York City and can't get yourself to New York City, that's okay. I think it's streaming. But I'd like to give you a little taste of the book we'll be necromancing this time. It's An Hour with the Movies and the Talkies by Gilbert Seldes, who was a very, very popular and influential cultural critic of the time. He was also a playwright. He hosted a television show in the 50s about jazz. He really got around. He died in 1970, and I don't know, it might be my ignorance. I think there are a lot of very educated people here today and a lot of librarians. But I don't know that I'd ever heard of the guy. If I had, he certainly hadn't stuck in my head. He has a lot of thoughts about movies and movie actors and movie producers of the period. And as other guests today have noted, 1929, when this book was published, was a really fertile time period for the movies, and the movies shifting from the silence that people had gotten so used to and the little shorts that you could go pay a nickel or a dime and sit through a whole day's worth of programming. Suddenly it was starting to morph into features and movie stars like Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, and the studio system where it was about money. So here is what he had to say about that. The moving picture is an illusion. It is also an industry. 500,000 people labor so that several 100 million others will spend $1 billion a year to see about 1,000 feature pictures and several thousand secondary ones, the majority of which are so stupid, tasteless, and wearisome that no man of average intelligence could bear to look at them twice. Now, recognizing the illusion, 6 people have, in the 30 years of the movie's existence, created perhaps a score of films which have interested men and women of intelligence and have suggested that the moving picture is or can be an art. It seems a small accomplishment, especially when placed against the vast bulk of silly and commonplace movies. So there you go. He published this too early to have any thoughts shared about Mickey Mouse talking. He was a huge fan of Charlie Chaplin. He was also, for any comics fans out there, he was a huge, huge fan of Crazy Cat. And that makes me like him right off the bat. So as you can see, I'm posting all the things that jump out at me. I found it really interesting and really readable, and it's on the Internet Archive. So I encourage you to spend some time with this book and then join us as it is resurrected as a one-night-only New York City variety show.
I'm Simon Close, and I'm a producer at WNYC and the creator of the Public Song Project. And the Public Song Project is this initiative where we invite anybody to send in a song based on something in the public domain. So it can be as simple as a straight song cover or a remix of a song. It can be an adaptation of a film or a book or poetry. We started the project 2 years ago, and we just this month launched the 2025 edition of the project. So in the last 2 years, we've gotten almost 200 songs. We've gotten to showcase the project at Lincoln Center. We've gotten to share some of the songs on the radio, and we've been covered in the New York Times. We also just released an album. Once those songs get sent in, there are two things that happen with them. The first is that the last couple of years I've put together a panel of judges that includes music journalists, public domain experts, professional musicians, who go through the songs and listen to them and then come back to me with some of their favorite picks. And those favorites, the submitters will feature their songs on WNYC, and they also get interviewed on the air. The other thing that we do with all the submissions is we put them into this big playlist on WNYC's website. We call it the Public Song Book. So if you send in a song to the Public Song Project, you're pretty much guaranteed to be a part of the project and featured on WNYC. I mentioned before that we've collected almost 200 songs, and they range all over the place. Some are pretty straightforward song covers. Some are song covers that the artists put their own sort of twist on them. We've gotten songs about Mickey Mouse, about The Great Gatsby, and all sorts of other things. Something I've really loved about this project is seeing all the different things that people get out of it. So some people are musicians who use the project to break through writer's block. It's also helped people connect and collaborate with family members, and sometimes resurface memories of loved ones that maybe they wouldn't have had a reason to otherwise. And one example of that was really special and touching to me from a submission we got from a submitter named Ellen Halloran, had to do with her mother and a song that she used to sing in the car.
Oh, we ain't got a barrel of money. Maybe we're ragged and funny, but we'll travel along, singing a song, side by side. Well, we don't know what's coming tomorrow. Maybe it's trouble and sorrow, but we'll travel the road, sharing our load, side by side.
So last year I expanded on the listener engagement part of this project and invited some professional musicians, like people who are sort of in the WNYC orbit and will be guests on the radio shows. I asked them to contribute to the project as well. And so over the better part of a year, or even more than a year, I reached out to all these musicians, and about 30 of them said yes to contributing to the project, including like crazy names like Roseanne Cash, Rhiannon Giddens, Bela Fleck, the Lemon Twigs, and They Might Be Giants, who recorded a cover of Lazy by Irving Berlin. And then with all of those, the rest of the 30-ish songs that we got, I got to put them on our own vinyl that is available on WNYC's website as a membership gift if you donate. And it's the official Public Song Project on vinyl. Here's what it looks like. And so that's the vinyl, and we're working on putting all those songs also on digital streaming platforms like Amazon Music, Spotify, etc. Anytime. And then another thing we've added to the project in its second year, just last year, is something we call the People's Concert. So this is basically just a recital where winners of the project and some other special guests get to perform their songs that they've won, and I get to present different pieces of the project and create kind of a physical space where everyone, including the audience, gets to be a part of the project in some way. And we just did our second People's Concert as a kind of coda for the 2024 project and also a launch point for the 2025 project at the beginning of January. We had it at the Public Theater. And so I just wanted to play a little clip from that concert featuring one of our 2024 winners, Mal Petty. So here's that clip. So that's the Public Song Project. It's been awesome to see how it's grown in the last couple years, and I'm really excited to see where it goes next. We just launched the 2025 edition, as I said before, and submissions are now open through April, so please submit a song. You can find out more by going to wnyc.org/publicsongproject. That's wnyc.org/publicsongproject. And I'll end this video with one more clip from our People's Concert earlier this month. So at both of the concerts we've done so far, we've ended the thing with a group song. Since this project is all about inviting anybody and everyone to participate, we also managed to make that true at these concerts as well. And what we do is we give everybody in the audience a kazoo, and then together we perform a song that's in the public domain. So this is from earlier this month, and Singin in the Rain entered the public domain this month, and here is Singin in the Rain from WNYC's Public Song Project.
The rain. All right, everybody, I'm dancing and singing in the rain. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
I love all of these different ways to play with the public domain and to engage with our shared cultural memory. That Necromancers event is going to be such a fabulous opportunity to see some of New York's creative performers build on new works of the public domain and the Song Project. Incredible, incredible. guys, I know we're coming to the end of our structured program here, but it is not over. We've still got a couple of really great things for you, including the announcement of our Public Domain Day film remix contest winner. So stick around if you can, but if you can't, we will have recordings for you, and you can share that with us after the fact. All right, so now I'd like to introduce Dorothy Berry, the curator of the National Museum of African American History, to talk about how you can use the Smithsonian's digital interactives to enhance public domain collections in the museum.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Berry, and I'm really happy to be able to join and talk about the role of public domain materials in my life. I am the digital curator at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. My background is in special collections, archives, and historical ethnography, which is really where I've developed my love of the freedom offered with public domain materials, and I'm really happy to be able to continue doing that work. As the digital curator at the museum, digital history in its entirety is within my portfolio, which means I get really fantastic opportunities to work with colleagues across the museum. Two colleagues that I work with often and who really make working digitally fun are Camila Stinnett and Jill Roberts, who are our searchable museum team. I'm going to share the screen so you can see what I'm talking through, because as a digital curator, it's a digital presentation. Searchable Museum is our museum's complete digital companion. One of my favorite features on Searchable Museum, which features exhibitions, stories, is a unique feature we built called constellations. Constellations allow us to work with single objects from our exhibitions, from our collections, and really connect them through time and space with different materials that help provide context of both their creation and of their lasting impact. One constellation I recently wrote was on Meta Fuller's Ethiopia, which was in our exhibit Reckoning. This beautiful statue was created as part of America's Making exposition, and it's been contextualized with information about the Harlem Renaissance, which is when the exhibition was, about Ethiopia in the African American imagination, to kind of give some context to why we would think about this. But one of the things that I was most happy to be able to add was a connection to a public domain material directly related to the context in which this sculpture was first seen, and that's the America's Making exposition. We were able to provide a little summary and a clip from the book itself, but what was great for me was the opportunity to really explore the book in depth. I found it on Smithsonian Library's digital collections, and it was digitized through the Internet Archive. This gave me a world of new context for what I was looking at, not just as a work of art, but also as part of a social movement and as part of political identity. So this statue was created, and this information is provided as part of a larger exposition where groups of diverse people, of immigrant groups from across the country, came together to celebrate both their contributions to the United States and their rich heritage. So it covers so many groups. And it's a little interesting for African Americans to be part of some of these other immigrant groups, but there's also a powerful move to present us as center to American population. This was interesting enough in itself for me, but what brought it to another level of interest was having the opportunity to read this full text, because it's in the public domain, and really see who was on the making of this committee. The chairman was James Weldon Johnson, who is famous enough that that's not a huge surprise. But what was surprising to me was seeing the name Jesse O'Ship, who brings together some other public domain work that I do, not as part of my job as digital curator, but as a contributing editor at the Public Domain Review. I had an opportunity to write about this amazing and very obscure sheet music production company that was run by all Black creatives and was started to really reimagine how Black people were presented in popular music at a time when Blackface minstrelsy was still pretty much the most popular thing around. And it related to this much more racial uplift focused exhibition because I noticed that Jesse Shipp was part of the team that built this together. And then that pulled in another public domain material from New York Public Library, this photo of everyone who was part of this African American theater league called the Frogs, but with Jesse Shipp sitting in the front row. So for me, that's fun on one level. Obviously, I just enjoy making these connections, but it's also a real statement about what the ability to have digital access to these materials means for anyone's ability to look into the past and really discover straight from the voices of the past what is happening and how it relates to us today.
Thank you so much to Dorothy for that super educational presentation. I can't wait to see what you all dream up with these interactives and how you are able to use them as well.
We've touched on so many different kinds of work so far, but 1929 was also a big moment in film history. The first Academy Awards took place on May 16th, 1929, to honor the best films of 1927 and 1928.
And that's not the only notable film. We're going to find out now who won this year's public domain film remix contest. Up next is one of this year's judges, Theo Unkrich. Theo is a media studies scholar, game designer, and intern with the Internet Archive. His academic and creative work explores early internet culture and queer representation. Over to you, Theo.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm very excited to have the chance to announce this year's winner. Last month, we announced the 2025 Public Domain Day Film Contest, asking artists to create and submit 2 to 3 minute short films highlighting media entering the public domain, with winners receiving cash prizes, $1,500 for first place, $1,000 for second, and $500 for third. And you delivered. Our team of 5 judges watched 137 short films in total, submitted to us by animators, visual artists, actors, composers, historians, and artists of all backgrounds. To evaluate our picks for the competition, we judged these films on how they, on their creative and often innovative use of public domain media, how they recontextualize public domain materials for a contemporary audience, and the ways in which they celebrate archives as points of access to these timeless works of art. While watching these shorts, I was struck by how kind many of these filmmakers were to their art. I saw the care these artists took to pair the written word or musical compositions with film clips, combing through hundreds or even thousands to find the perfect match for the story they wanted to tell. I was particularly moved by the care I saw in so many hand-animated works, which I know must have taken painstaking effort, all in honor of art nearly a century old. It is with this kindness in mind that I announced the winning film, which blew us away with the love it showed its source material. I adored how the filmmaker put the spotlight on lesser known public domain works, combining footage and text into mixed media collage. I found myself wanting to sing along to the music in celebration of preservation, and I think you will too. It's easy. The words are on screen. Without further ado, the winner of the 2025 Public Domain Day Film Contest, When I Leave the World Behind by Kaylin Meadows.
Wow, I'm like literally tearing up. That was so special and so beautiful. I just love seeing what people come up with in this contest. And I do also just want to say thank you to Theo and to the other judges who spent this weekend scrambling to watch 150, I think, submissions. That is bananas. This contest has just been so amazing. Look, we're at the end of our program now, and being able to come together as a community and celebrate our shared past is always a delight, but this is not our last chance to do so. If you want to stick around for the next 15 minutes or so after we kind of turn off the recording, Theo is going to play a few more of the films, the second and third place winners, and maybe a few honorable mentions if you want to stick around here in the Zoom. But if you're in the Bay Area, please join us tonight at the Internet Archive for our big party celebration. It's going to be a real Academy Awards style affair with fancy dresses and paparazzi and screening of our Public Domain Day film contest winners. That's tonight at 6 p.m.
And if you're feeling FOMO about missing hanging out with us tonight in person, we're going to the city of FOMO, New York City, on February 12th for an hour with the movies and the talkies at 6:30 p.m. That's going to be presented by my organization, Library Futures, and the NYU Engelberg Center for Innovation Law and Policy, along with some of the folks you heard from today. We're really looking forward to it. As usual, a video of this event will be available on the Internet Archive and also on YouTube for posterity. And maybe, in 100 years, people will be giving a presentation about this presentation and sort of a meta continuation of the public domain. But if you can't wait 100 years, we'll be sending a link to our registered attendees within the next couple days. Thanks again to all of our wonderful musicians and presenters and creatives, and to our behind the scenes admin team for yet another great event. See you next year in the 1930s. Wow, so much is going to change from year to year. Thanks again, and also thank you to my co-presenter, Leila Bailey of the Internet Archive. See you on the internet.